Hollywood is getting more political by the day, and now Tom Hanks has apparently taken that conversation straight into the middle of the debate surrounding Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Instead of simply celebrating the movie's box office performance, Hanks is being presented as turning its success into a political victory, bringing up DEI, LGBTQ representation, Donald Trump, the 2026 midterms, and accusations against people who criticized the casting. And that's where this story gets interesting, because not everyone who criticized The Odyssey was doing it for political reasons. Some people simply didn't like the movie. Others had questions about the casting or the way certain characters were adapted from Greek mythology. So why is the conversation suddenly becoming about MAGA, Trump, and the midterms? And is Hollywood once again turning a movie's performance into a political battle? Before we get into everything, if you're new to the Woke Watch, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we cover the biggest Hollywood stories, controversies, and entertainment news right here. Now, let's get into what is actually going on. There's been a noticeable trend developing throughout Hollywood, with actors, filmmakers, writers, producers, comedians, and other entertainment figures becoming increasingly involved in political rallies and protests ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. And Tom Hanks is now being pulled into that conversation as well. Hanks has become increasingly outspoken about politics over the past couple of years, and critics have argued that his public commentary has moved him closer to the type of political celebrity activism associated with people like Robert De Niro. But now, the conversation has taken another turn because of The Odyssey. Let's be clear from the beginning. People are going to have very different opinions about Christopher Nolan's movie. Some viewers absolutely loved it. Others thought certain sections were slow, disconnected, or uneven. Even people who enjoyed the film have pointed out that some scenes feel like they move too quickly, while other sequences could have benefited from more development and additional screen time. Personally, the easiest way to describe the movie is probably sporadically entertaining. There are moments that work extremely well, followed by scenes that can feel strangely isolated from everything around them. The Cyclops sequence, for example, has received plenty of praise, and the siren sequence is another part of the movie that stood out to many viewers. But there are also sections that simply don't work for everyone. And that's important, because criticizing those elements doesn't automatically make someone a political extremist. That's where the current controversy becomes much more complicated. One of the biggest discussions surrounding The Odyssey has involved its casting. Lupita Nyong'o's portrayal of Helen of Troy generated debate among viewers who expected the character to look different based on traditional depictions of the mythology. Elliot Page's involvement as Sinon also became part of the larger online argument surrounding representation and casting. Now, people can obviously disagree about whether those casting decisions worked. That's completely normal. A movie can be successful and still have casting choices that some viewers don't like. A movie can also have a diverse cast without every single audience member being required to agree with every casting decision. But according to the claims being circulated surrounding Tom Hanks' comments, he took a much more political approach to the movie's success. The argument attributed to him essentially frames the film's box office performance as proof that the people who criticized its casting were wrong. And that's where the discussion moves away from filmmaking and directly into politics. The most controversial part of the alleged comments centers around the idea that critics of Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page were supposedly motivated by racism, anti-LGBTQ sentiment, or MAGA politics. That's a pretty serious accusation. Because here's the problem. You cannot automatically determine someone's political affiliation simply because they disliked a casting choice. And you certainly can't assume that someone is a Trump supporter just because they criticized a movie. There are millions of people who can watch The Odyssey, dislike certain creative decisions, and have absolutely no political motivation behind that opinion whatsoever. That's something that gets lost whenever Hollywood celebrities turn entertainment criticism into a political argument. And that's exactly why this controversy has become so heated. There's another major point that needs to be made here. The fact that The Odyssey performed strongly at the box office doesn't necessarily prove that every criticism surrounding the movie was wrong. Christopher Nolan already had an enormous advantage going into this release. His name carries tremendous weight. His previous movies have demonstrated that audiences are willing to show up for his films, particularly when they're presented as major theatrical experiences. So anyone claiming that The Odyssey was obviously destined to fail simply because of its casting would have been making a pretty questionable prediction. There were plenty of reasons to expect a major box office performance. At the same time, strong box office numbers don't magically eliminate criticism. You can have a commercially successful movie that still has people who dislike parts of it. That's how entertainment works. Different viewers respond to different things. Some people might love the visual spectacle. Others might focus on the performances. Someone else might dislike the pacing. Another viewer might have problems with the adaptation of the mythology. All of those opinions can exist simultaneously, but the controversy doesn't stop there. The comments attributed to Hanks go even further by connecting the movie's success to LGBTQ representation, DEI, and the upcoming midterm elections. The argument is essentially that the success of The Odyssey demonstrates that Hollywood should continue embracing more diverse casting and that this supposedly represents a victory against the political movement attempting to push back against DEI policies. That's a much larger claim than simply saying the movie performed well. And that's precisely why critics are reacting so strongly. Why can't a successful movie simply be celebrated as a successful movie? Why does every major Hollywood victory have to become evidence in a larger political argument? That's the question many people are now asking, because audiences are already exhausted by the constant culture war battles surrounding entertainment. People want to watch movies. They want to decide whether they like them. They want to discuss performances, writing, cinematography, action sequences, music, pacing, and storytelling. But whenever every one of those conversations gets transformed into a political argument, the actual movie can disappear underneath the controversy. Now, regarding Elliot Page specifically, there has been plenty of discussion about whether the casting was the right choice for Sign-On. That's ultimately a matter of creative opinion. Personally, I think there were other performers who could potentially have handled the role differently. That doesn't mean someone is automatically attacking an actor's identity. It's possible to believe that a particular actor wasn't the best fit for a particular character without turning that opinion into something hateful. And that's a distinction Hollywood commentators sometimes fail to make. Criticism of casting is not automatically discrimination. Likewise, supporting diverse casting doesn't automatically mean every casting decision will work for everyone. Both things can be true at the same time. There's another part of this controversy that deserves attention. The argument attributed to Hanks reportedly goes as far as suggesting that he can speak for Greek audiences and that Greek people embrace this version of the story and its casting. But that's an enormous statement. Greece is not a single person. Greek audiences aren't going to have one universal opinion about a movie simply because the story comes from Greek mythology. There are going to be people who love Nolan's interpretation. There are going to be people who dislike it. And there will be people somewhere in the middle. There has also been criticism from viewers who believe certain elements of the original mythology were altered, simplified, or left out in Nolan's adaptation. That's part of the normal debate that happens whenever Hollywood takes an ancient story and transforms it into a modern blockbuster. So saying that an entire country agrees with one interpretation is a claim that deserves to be treated very carefully. And this brings us to the bigger issue. Hollywood celebrities increasingly appear willing to use blockbuster movies as political platforms. Whether it's Trump, DEI, LGBTQ representation, elections, or cultural debates, the conversation seems to move toward politics almost immediately. And that's frustrating to a lot of viewers, because when The Odyssey performs well, the simplest explanation is that audiences wanted to see a Christopher Nolan movie. That's already a significant achievement. It doesn't necessarily mean that every political argument surrounding the movie has been defeated. And it certainly doesn't mean everyone who criticized the movie was secretly part of some political movement. At the end of the day, people can watch the same movie and walk away with completely different opinions. Some viewers will call The Odyssey a masterpiece. Others will find parts of it slow. Some will praise the casting. Others will criticize it. Some will love the mythology adaptation. Others will argue that too much was changed. That's normal. What's becoming increasingly unusual is how quickly Hollywood turns those disagreements into political warfare. And if the claims surrounding Tom Hanks's comments are accurate, that's exactly what is happening here. The real question now is whether Hollywood will eventually realize that audiences don't always want a political lecture attached to every box office victory. Sometimes people simply want to watch a movie. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think about The Odyssey? Did you enjoy Christopher Nolan's adaptation, or did you find parts of it disappointing? And do you think Hollywood celebrities should keep politics separate from movie discussions, or is this simply part of the entertainment industry now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.